All right, so a couple more people joining. And get back. All right, so again, from a news and events kind of thing, this time of year, there's not a lot. I'd say the biggest one, and we started talking about this a little bit amongst ourselves before we kicked off, is WordPress 6.1 was released not that long ago, and there's already a point release for it, which I wasn't aware of. It's 6.1.1, so it's the Misha release, and I forget exactly. Give me one second. Who is Misha? I know it's based on jazz. Who is
They're
this?
all jazz, yeah.
Mikel Misha Alperin.
Misha.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Misha. Not Marsha. Misha.
That's it.
So we're probably gonna, again, we're not gonna have enough time tonight to dive into it a lot. In fact, I think that's probably a topic we'll do next meetup, probably next month. Peter and I could spend some time diving into all these features, but just at a high level, a couple things worth noting. Again, there's template editor improvements, template patterns, global styles and blocks. So improvements to block types, that's probably the thing I think most people tend to use, not really the full site editing features. There's a new default theme again, 2023. And one of our caveats always is sometimes these releases come out, and if you're using a theme that doesn't take advantage of these things, you're really not going to see a lot of. You're really not going to see a lot, So you have to actually have a theme that really is like a full site editing enabled theme. So again, you probably have already been updated, or maybe even got the point release as well too. So Peter, anything to call out really on it at this point before we dive into next month?
Yeah, I think you covered this idea that there are a lot of really good things coming, and if you are somebody who wants to really dabble in kind of behind the scene things and see what the future is, especially with theme development, then setting this up and using the new default theme and all it's really getting very, very interesting what is going to be in the hands of users. But there are things where theme developers are going to have to decide what they are going to allow in. I think we're all going to be really happy when everybody can get all of the block padding, margins, borders. Those are some really great things that are in core blocks now, but not universally applied. I think we'll see more of that. The control of things like gallery started with it, but now lists, it's much more broken down into really lists or a bunch of things inside, so you can do a lot more within a list. So for people who use lists a lot, so there's a lot of really good advancements in the editor. Not all of them immediately available, so mileage may vary.
All right. So more to come. Like I said, next month we'll do a much deeper dive.
We'll do more of that. Yeah.
Just another one, again, this kind of reminder from last month, we talked about WordPress Accessibility Day was November 2nd and 3rd. If you missed it, good news. It's all the sessions are available online. So if you go to the WordPress Accessibility Day website, you'll find it there. Or you can also subscribe to their YouTube channel as well. I didn't realize there was a YouTube channel, so I kind of learned that and subscribed. So check it out. Like I said, very important topic. We're going to that's our plan for next year. We've talked about this for a while, is try to cover some of these topics in the upcoming months or so. So feel free to check them out. Again, they're all free. So that's about it though, from an events and news standpoint. So tools and tips. Peter,
let me do a quick, we'll do this quickly. So this past month, there was, I came across a number of little plugins, and I'm starting to experiment with some that are lesser known. And in fact, it's interesting. There's been a lot of conversation about, what plugins are promoted and seen first, and should we really dismiss ones? We've talked about this on our own meetups about, well, if it doesn't have a lot of users, but maybe not all that fair. So I found one. There's very few users, very simple, but I like it a lot. It may not apply to you, may not be anything you're interested in, but it's called Sticky Admin Menu. And it's got a 5-star review, which is me. So I put in that review, and it's a very simple, very light admin size menu. And what I'll show, I'll install it on the back of our site here, install plugins. And it does this one simple thing that is best demonstrated than described. Oops, add new, sorry. I haven't added it to this site. So, and you'll also see, and there's something that is really interesting for me personally, who uses, experiments with a lot of plugins, which is the way searches work. Kind of interesting how you have to kind of, even if you put the exact name of something, you have to look for it. So if you scroll down to this very unattractive brown box, but sticky admin menu, that is the one. I'm going to install it. It's a very tiny menu. That Scott Kingsley Clark is actually well known in the community. In fact, I've seen some of his presentations online. And all it did is, and kicks in right away. If you notice, I was looking at plugins. Now the plugins is sitting at the top of the menu, of my admin menu. What I like about this is, say I'm working in settings, which is very often way down here. And if I go into my settings, now settings is at the top of my menu. And it's just the thing that I'm working on is at the top left, the dashboard that we're all used to seeing. And that's all it does. But it makes the thing that you're working on, especially if you're in an area like settings where you might want to be going through a bunch of stuff, it just puts it at the top of the admin menu. That's it. I'm now installing it almost automatically, because now I'm getting used to quickly going over, hey, if I'm over here and I'm looking at, I don't know, custom post types, and I'm working in that, and now I can see everything. It's just sitting there at the top of the menu. And that is sticky admin menu.
That's a good one. Yeah, especially if you're working on a site that has a lot of plugins and things, right?
Yeah.
You're just finding stuff. And,
yeah.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome.
So our presenter tonight is Bill. I know, Bill, you're going to do your own kind of introduction of who you are, but so Bill has presented for our group in the past. I think last time you presented, Bill, was probably in person, right? That was one of our last in-person ones. It was about how Google works and is kind of related to SEO. So Bill's, again, wealth of knowledge. We're very lucky to have him here. And again, it's a topic, I talked about this or Peter and I talked about this a little bit ourselves, saying, hey, we know that this is something that affects all website owners. I was saying earlier, before most people join the call, it's like, I'm still getting the emails every now and then for like some of the sites I manage from Google saying, hey, you need to update your tags and all this. I'm like, well, what do I need to do? So I think Bill is definitely the guy to help us out and help us understand what Google Analytics, the newest version, means. So Bill, take it away.
Okay.
You should be able to share. There we go.
Okay, you seen the right screen?
Yep, looks good. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, so what I'm going to be covering today is how to create a Google Analytics 4 account, basically for beginners. I'm not a real expert in this, but I have set up a bunch of accounts. My primary business is digital consulting, and I have to show the value that I bring. So I'm always working on how to create custom events and goals in Google Analytics. And one of the things that you've probably seen in your inbox a couple times in the last week is that Google is shutting down Google Universal Analytics. So if you have a Google Analytics account and you've been using it for a while, more than likely it's a Google Universal account, and it's going to be going away starting July of next year. So let's look at the agenda here. So I'm going to be talking about the background, why it's changing, when it's changing, what's changing, and then we're going to get into how to create a new analytics property, how to add the scripts to the site, different ways, And then we'll look at a couple settings. And if we have time, we'll get into how to make custom reports and how to view the information in there. Can we get a show of hands? How many people have Google Analytics? I'm assuming everybody does. Or maybe the better question would be, who is there anybody that's completely new, doesn't have a Google Analytics account? All right, looks like we might have one, Gene. Okay, so good to know. So the background, there's two different analytics accounts. One is Google Universal Analytics, which is the one that everyone's most familiar with. It's been around since 2005. Actually, in 2020, they said they recommend that people stop using it and they migrate to Google Analytics 4. And then last year, they said they're actually going to stop collecting data in the Google Universal Analytics account starting July 1st. So that means if you don't have Google Analytics 4 set up and you go to look at reports, you're not going to have any data at all. Now, Google Analytics 4 was created because of a lot of different reasons. One of them, privacy reasons, but people want more and more information out of their analytics. And Google Analytics is a complete rebuild on how they collect information and how you can set it up to display information. Unfortunately, because of this, it looks completely different, and people are saying that they don't like it. I think what it's going to take is some getting used to. So as I said, initially when you look at this, it's going to be difficult to find reports and data if you're using Google Analytics. The navigation is very complicated. It's not intuitive or user friendly. It's really designed for data analysts. You really need to understand that this is not an upgrade. This is a completely separate instance. So they have nothing to do with each other, except that you have the same email address that you log in with. And when Google Universal shuts down, it's not going to be collecting any more information. And the GA4 will only have the information starting the 24 hours after you set up an account. So if you realize on July 1st that you didn't set this up and you go to look at your account, if you were to set up a new account, you wouldn't have any data for 24 hours. You'll be able to go back into your Universal account and see what happened in there, but they're not tied together. The information doesn't port over. And so it's really recommended to set this up now so that at least you have a couple months of history starting July 1st when your Google Universal account shuts down. So it's good to know that there's a lot of people with Google Analytics already installed. So basically, you'd log in, you create a new property, and you would add the script to the website, just like you did for the original Google Analytics account. So my recommendation here is run in parallel. You'll have the two reports running after you set up the new report. For those that are new to analytics, really what you need to do is you need to set up a Google Analytics account. And as of, I don't know when, but if you were to log in today into Google Analytics, you could only set up a Google Analytics account, Google Analytics 4 account. So no worries about having different accounts there. For both, you're going to have to add the script to the site, and you can do that via a plugin through the header as code. And my recommendation would be do it via Tag Manager. There's a lot of good reasons to do that. We won't have time today, but you could really get into custom reports, looking at events, You want to see things like people that click on a button or click on a button then don't complete your cart, all those kinds of things you could set up manually if you don't have a plugin to set up a plugin set up already for your e-commerce. I'm going to go through this as a slide presentation first, and then we'll jump in and I'll show you what it looks like live. So basically, when you log into your Google Analytics account, you're gonna click on the gear here. It's going to show this screen, and you could create you could create it via a setup assistant, but they're so different. It's almost, I think it's more confusing to use the setup assistant. I would just create a new property from scratch. So when you go to set up the property, it'll ask you a couple questions, and then this window will eventually pop up. And this measurement ID is the number that you want to have if you're going to add it to an existing plugin. So you basically click this copy button here, and then you can go into your plugins. And there's a lot of plugins, some that you may already have, like a lot of people use Monster Insights. If you don't have a plugin and you want to add a plugin, I would. My screen's not moving.
Bill, sorry, just interrupt with one question I got asked because before you move off from it. So can you explain just briefly the difference between an account and a property?
Yes. So an account would be the account would be all the data that's collected by the script, and the property. It's a little different for GA4. So I'll have to show it to you live.
Okay.
But maybe it's a good time to do it. So if you were to log into your Google Analytics account, you would have a bunch of different accounts, and these accounts could be for a website, for a bunch of different websites. And then when you create a property, and that's what we're going to be doing, is creating a property here. This could be also different instances, like we're going to have a GA4 account, we're going to have the regular account, and it's sort of like, it's hard. That's a good question. It's hard to explain. I'm not an expert, but normally what I would do is I would have one account per website. I would have different properties for different tags, and then there's actually a view in the old Google Universal where you can set up a view that would exclude your IP address. And you could have another view that doesn't exclude your IP address. You could have another view that is just a segment of visitors that entered into a specific section of your page. So these are sort of like filters for your report. These are reports. And then the accounts, I would call them the client in my case. That's how I would set it up.
Yeah.
Do you have set it up, Clay?
Also, Sue followed up saying, like, so each website is an account, and then properties can do different things in Google Analytics, right?
Yeah.
And I guess it really depends on how you set it up. I think that's the thing. If you actually go back to the way that different people may set things up differently, because I thought properties also could be like, if you were tracking mobile apps and things like that, don't those also count as a property?
Right. Good point. So in the Google Universal, I don't believe the typical Google Universal could track website and analytics data in the same property. So you had to have two separate properties. Yeah. In Google Analytics 4, you could actually use the same tag on your app and on your website.
Oh, thanks.
Bill, can I just add on that might further clarify?
Yeah.
It's considered, I believe, best practice to have a separate account for each property or each discrete website. It makes management so much easier. You you can't split properties off an account and transfer them. So you want, if you have clients or a need to keep things discreet, you want a separate account for each website, each property. If you just are managing a couple of your own sites, then by all means, just put them in one account.
Yeah, and even then, I personally, even for dummy sites and things like that, I would create a separate property, separate account, just because it's easier to manage. I think as I navigate down through the reports that I'm trying to get to. Thank you. Any other questions on that?
I think we're good right now. Thanks, Bill.
Okay. So the other way to add the script is doing it manually via the header. And if you click the tag at the top, the view tag instructions at the top, you'll see that you can copy and paste this into the header, and it gives you the information on how to do that. You also, if it wasn't a WordPress site, you also have the ability, you can click on this tab here, and it will give you instructions specifically for a lot of different content management systems like Wix and other things like that. But being a WordPress group, I didn't look into that. I like Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager basically is a script that you can add to your website, and then you don't have to do things on your website to create tags that create events. And events are really the things that you can pull out of the analytics to create really deep reports. Like if you didn't have a plugin that told you how many form completions you got in your Google Analytics, you could create a tag to do that a number of ways. You can look at, the easiest way would be if you had a thank you page, you could create a tag that said, if a web page with thank-you is fired, then create an event for that, and then you can pull that event out and you can add it in your report as a conversion. And the way to do that is similar to doing it with the apps. Basically, you're going to copy the measurement ID, and then if you go into Tag Manager, it's a simple tag that you select the GA4. Oops. The GA4 configuration tag, you're going to paste the ID here. Your trigger is going to basically be all pages. So you have to have the tag on the website. You have to have the analytics tag on the website. There's 3 different ways to add it. You can add it via the header. You can add it by adding the ID into a plugin that you have, or you can add it by adding the Tag Manager script to your site and then having a tag run that fires the Google Analytics tag when somebody views a page. So that's maybe a little bit complicated. Now might be a good time for questions.
Sue had a quick one, and yeah, I was thinking about this as well too. So if your sites, let's say you've implemented all your sites with Tag Manager, do you need to do anything regarding Google Analytics 4? And I would think the answer is yes, because isn't there within the tags themselves, if I remember, there's something in there where you were selecting the UA property, right? So doesn't that have to change?
Yeah, so you could install the Universal Analytics on your site via the header. Maybe that's what you did in the past, or maybe you have it in a plugin now. You could also create a tag in Tag Manager I'll say fire the Google Analytics tag, but you need the Google Tag Manager tag to fire on the website. So you either add the tag directly to the website, or you add the Tag Manager script to the website, and then you can work within Tag Manager to do all kinds of stuff And anything you do in Tag Manager would automatically fire on your website because of that Tag Manager script. The Tag Manager basically manages all of the tags for you, and is just the one script on your site.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I think in Tag Manager is where you'd have to switch from the UA, Universal Analytics, to using the new GA4 probably.
Yeah, so I would do it in parallel. So I would have them
Okay.
both.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll get to that in a minute. I'll show you.
Yeah, and I know some people have some questions about tag. So Tag Manager is probably a whole deeper thing to go into, which we won't have a lot of time on. In fact, I looked back, if you go back to, I'll find the exact date, but we did a pretty in-depth Google Analytics thing a couple of years ago, which at least the Tag Manager piece shouldn't have changed that much. So I'll try to find the link to that for folks, and we could, I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah.
But I think to answer Sue's question, that if you're running Tag Manager, you don't have to do anything on your site because it's saying fire the Tag Manager. You have to do something in Tag Manager and add this new GA4 tag. And then what Bill says is you're going to run Universal and GA4 at the same time. Both tags are going to go until you're comfortable turning off Universal. Because again, I think one of the things people might be surprised about again is the history does not transfer. Bill already made that clear. I would make it clear again because people get really shocked when they go into GA4 and go, I have no history. And it's like, yeah, that's the other thing. So
Right. Okay, so one of the other things you want to do is set the data retention to 14 months. So when you're looking at your new GA4 analytics account, click on data settings, data settings, data retention, and you're going to change this from 2 months to 14 months. So going forward, Google is only going to have 14 months worth of data starting July 1st and moving forwards. It will build up to 14 months, and then it will only have 14 months of data. So you'll be able to look back a year and a couple months. That's a big change. Now you can get really fancy and do all kinds of things with saving the information and then trying to figure out how to run other reports outside of it. But it's nice to see. I like to see history because 13 months is nice because I like to see a month at the same month 1 year ago. But it's also nice to look back 2 and 3 years to see the changes. All right, any questions before I jump into this? I'm not going to actually go step by step through it. I'm going to jump between different screens and show what to do. All right, so so here, this is a Google Analytics Universal account. And if you're looking at it normally, you'll be looking at your reports or something like that. And then if you clicked on the admin button down here, you would see this screen. And what you want to do is you want to create a new property. You want to call it something. You want to change the time zone for the website. Really important for e-commerce. You could skip this so you can fill this in here. It's not a big deal. And then you see the screen says start collecting information, and you can then select what kind of information you're going to collect. We're going to collect web information. You can put in the website here. My website. And then you can take a look at the things that it's already collecting for enhanced measurement. And you're going to say create stream.
Can I pause you there for a second, Bill? So that's one big difference right there. versus universal analytics, right? So like Tag Manager, one of the values of Tag Manager was in Tag Manager, you could set those very discrete events and tracking things now. So now it looks like in GA4, they're exposing that a little bit more, making it easier. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I would say they didn't out of the box look at file downloads or form interactions, and depending on your site, that might work or might not work.
You mean in the old Universal Analytics, or you mean
in the old Universal Analytics?
Right. So like outbound clicks, yeah, like those kind of things, or scrolls in the past, you'd have to create a tag and listen to those events.
Yep.
So it looks like now they're basically letting you do this here as opposed to having to dig into like Tag Manager. So that's interesting. Yep. Okay. All right. So I was just thinking out loud. Thanks.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
So while we're losing some things, we're gaining some really powerful things, because man, measuring those events is great, but setting it up was
pain.
Real painful, to the point where I would often just not do it because it's too painful. Just
right. If you get familiar with Tag Manager, it becomes second nature, and you can create events for all kinds of things. Like if you can measure it as a click, as a URL, and there's a lot of other things you can measure. You can set up events in Tag Manager, which would then fire as an event in the analytics, and then you can pull those out and slice and dice them by all kinds of information. We'll go through some of that in a little bit. So here's if you wanted to install that manually, where you can copy this information, follow the instructions here, and then add it to your website. Here is where the specific instructions are. So there's actually one for Monster Insights, if you want to click on that. But I'm going to go through Tag Manager. So I'm going to click this, I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to go to my Tag Manager. And Ray, this is what you were talking about. Like, did you need to change?
Right, the type there is Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, yeah. So
don't want to go too much into Tag Manager, but a tag basically is information, and a trigger is the trigger that triggers the information. So if we click on here, it gives me a whole bunch of pre-designed tags, and one of them is the universal tag, which you may or may not have used already to add the universal tag to your site. In this specific site, I had added it via the header a while back. It's just a junk site that I play with. So this is how you would add the GA4. You just click on here, you put that there. You put all pages, because you want it to fire on all pages. You change the name, you can call it GA4 configuration dash, and you can add the measurement ID if you want, or call it whatever you want. So we're going to say test. I'm going to save this. Now this is assuming that the Tag Manager is already on the site, because I already had a Tag Manager account. So once I publish this, that will once I publish this, it will show up on the site when I view the pages on my site, and then within 24 hours I'll start collecting information. So that's how easy it is in Tag Manager. So the idea here is, don't wait, create the account. The account's easy to set up, and then you'll be collecting data that you'll be able to play with. And if you really want to get into learning how to create events in Tag Manager, or just how to set up reports, you have time to do that before Google Analytics Universal goes away.
And while you were while you're presenting, Bill, I looked at just like one of the SEO plugins that I use, which is SEO Press, and on one of my demo sites, it looks like they have updated the plugin so that you can have both measurement IDs. You can have the UA ID as well as the G ID. So I don't know. I don't have a site with Yoast on it, but I can look at that as well. I would assume the latest version of Yoast probably lets you do something similar, or any of the other SEO plugins. Does anyone know?
One of them does. I don't typically add them that way. I'm not a big plugin fan. I'm more a tag manager person.
And Data Studio. So the other thing you mentioned was interesting. It looks like they're moving some of the Data Studio functionality into kind of Google Analytics itself. Have you heard anything, Bill, about? I know Data Studio, for some reason, all of a sudden it got renamed to something weird. Like, also my reports were coming for like Laurel, or it's just something like some strange. Like, when did that happen?
We're being recorded. I don't know why they changed the name. They changed the logo to. None of the functionality has changed.
Looker, yeah, it's a Looker. First time I got it, I was like, what is this? Is this real? But you haven't heard anything? I know you're more tuned to that news, Bill. Have you heard anything about, is that stuff going away eventually, or is it still?
No, I haven't heard anything. I hope not. I mean, that's.
I hope not either. Okay.
All my reports are basically using Data Studio. Basically looking at progress.
Okay, so yeah, it's like you said, I think the main takeaway from this for folks is this is coming. It's right around the corner. Start playing around with and getting familiar with GA4. As Bill showed, there's a few different ways. I think I assume for most people, however you have Universal Analytics currently installed on your site, it's probably the easiest way is to kind of stick with that. So if your theme supports it in the in the header, if your theme gives you a spot to do that, you can start adding the GA4 code in there as well. But it's probably just more of getting familiar with it. I'm looking at any questions. Peter, do you see any questions that we missed in the chat?
No, I think people would love to see the different ways of adding the code, and I was going to suggest that depending on what our next hour is going to bring, maybe we can experiment with the caveat that we're experimenting, live. So that's one thing. I had my own question, which is, do we know, and I don't, if Google Analytics 4, it's got a great way of building reports, but does it have canned reports? So, and that was one of the things with Universal or the current Google Analytics, right? So you'd get reports that are relatively easy to pull off. There's even some natural language, show me, that type of thing. But I'm curious if there is, things a little bit easier than building everything from scratch.
They have basic reports, but I don't know. I don't find them useful.
Okay.
I'm always trying to look at why things happened, or I'm trying to measure specific things that I'm trying to make happen. So I will usually set up my events so that I can track those things in Google Analytics, but I report them in Google Data Studio because it's just a beautiful visual dashboard compared to this. But I think if you wanted to get the reports that you currently get from Google Universal, you would want to set those up as Explore reports. It all depends on what you're measuring and what, some people just check in like, oh, what happened? But, if you're running a business and you're trying to make improvements, there are things you're specifically trying to improve. And so you would make reports that help you look at that in a snapshot.
We had a couple questions, Bill, too, about Search Console. So do you know, is the new analytics, I think you showed that kind of, is it pulling in Search Console data now as well? Or it's connected to this one?
Connected with Search Console as well, because you could have done that with Google universal. I don't. I pull that information again into Data Studio. Let's jump back into the setup. So you can connect Google Ads. You can connect Search Console. You can connect Google Merchant Center, BigQuery, which is a big database if you're trying to pull a lot of information in there. And so that would be like, it might be your operating information. You can pull that back in and see if there's any correlation between traffic and operations results. I don't know that anything, I've Google Play links, I guess. What's that, an Android app, Google Play?
Yeah, it's for it's their store. I'm thinking
The
of
store for sale.
yeah. It's store for like, it's like the iOS store kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Another question, just kind of general, like,
You know what I would say for the person who asked that question, if you're into Search Console, you should definitely look at Google Data Studio, because you can pull a lot more than 1,000 rows of data into Data Studio than what you can get out of Search Console by itself. I don't know how much data you can pull in from Search Console into analytics, but for sure, Data Studio, you can get almost I don't know what the number is, 10,000 rows of data instead of 1,000.
There was kind of a general question about good resources for learning more about GA4 and Tag Manager. I mean, I would say some of it is probably on the Google site itself, right? Is it still, like, there's a help thing under analytics, which might get into too much detail, though, I wonder.
There's a couple people that are really good at presenting information. I can add those links as a slide and share the presentation with you.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the two that I know of that I think do a great job is lovesdata.com
Yep.
and Measure School.
Measure School is good too. Yep.
Yeah, Measure School and Loves Data, and they have YouTube channels where they really, break things down, and you can get into some specific detail. But yeah, the YouTube channel for Loves Data, he does some really good stuff, I think.
Or you can buy a giant thick book like I just
Look at that.
I have a date though. This was a heavily detailed thing on Tag Manager is the topic I think that gets a little complicated, but it's very powerful. Like how you create tags and Tag Manager. We didn't touch upon it here. We might have touched upon it in that 2019 presentation, because it's basically its own tool in Studio for developing things and testing them. And it is an enterprise level tool, which means it's complicated and powerful, but you don't have to use it to that level, so yeah, that I'd say a lot of the stuff too, search on YouTube for kind of beginner topics on how to implement it, because I think you might find some better, like, simple step-by-step ways.
Yeah, I'll post a couple of videos that I came across that I thought were really good, and they covered different. One covered the site kit, one covered just putting in tags and all. I was looking for my Google Analytics book, but I did come across, I don't know. Remember this one?
That's a great book.
That's a great book from a million years ago.
Yeah.
And the website designs, but the principles still apply. If you're building a website, don't make me think. Make things, but it's funny because you can. I don't know if you could tell, but it's some old websites that are being demoed in this book. But Steve Krug, don't make me think, still on the shelf.
Peter, I'm going to tell you, if I had a nickel for every time I've used that line on people in business, I could retire.
Yeah, exactly. Don't make me think. The simple things. We're going back. It's like, if everyone's calling it a cart, why are you calling it a bag? Well, now when this happened, but that was one of the first things. It's just like, You're doing things to be clever. I have a friend who's doing a site and he's calling everything like it's all about courses, but he likes the flight metaphor. So it's all about booking a flight, and you mean, signing up for a course, and it's like you're making them think. So Bill, I don't, and Ray, I'll let you MC this, but are you done with most of your? Because
I was gonna say,
I don't want to cut you off either.
I was just typing that. So the rest of normally what we try to do with our presentations is just have it to an hour, and then the rest of this is we can continue asking questions about Google Analytics or anything else. It's fair game now. It's like we were trying to make this more of having a help desk, open forum kind of thing. I mean, we could look at anything at this point. If people have your websites you want us to look at, or if you have a question about analytics on your site, or again, this doesn't have to be analytics specific, but feel free to take yourself off mute, throw it into the chat window.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ray. I thought you said you were trying to get the whole meeting down to an hour.
Yeah,
Running longer.
That was just your part of it.
Okay.
Ray, I noticed we have Senor Juan Rodan from Mexico here.
Yeah.
And if that is true, I'm suggesting that we hold a January meeting down right around his location.
There you go.
You don't mean virtual, you mean actual in person, yes.
Why not? Look at that ocean behind him.
I know, looks good one.
I'm enjoying the fact that we have a couple of meetup organizers from across the country.
Yes, thank you.
So Art has a meetup. Eagle works with a number of meetups, as I understand it. Is there anyone else that we're missing? I know Sue attends a lot of things that I attend.
Eric also does meetups.
He's here too.
Eric is, yeah, he just spoke up.
Oh yeah, Eric. Okay, great. Yeah.
I just troll Peter wherever I go look and see where he is and go pick up and go to those meetups.
I have a great one that I'm attending on Fridays, but I need to be selective because it's a very small group of people get to sign up for it, but it's awesome.
What's the general topic?
Of what it is?
Yeah.
Theme development and builders, but from somebody who is well known in the theme development.
John, you're not going to share that.
I'll send it to you directly.
Ooh.
I have a question about that, Peter, if you could answer it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're aware of this BS that's going on with the developer of Oxygen, where he started a new builder and he's kind of like taking his attention, claiming he hasn't, away from Oxygen.
Breakdance.
So a lot of people are trying to think maybe, go into bricks or something. So do you got a take on all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where Oxygen came out, a lot of, lifetime deals, people bought into it, were really sold on the whole thing. And then all of a sudden breakdance was where he went with it. I don't even know what got changed. I backed off. I have an Oxygen license. It's a whole different way of working. It basically overtakes everything. I think breakdance is similar. I think we found that there's a number of folks who have kind of overextended their welcome. That's really harsh to say, but in that when they make changes, and you've got and Oxygen was one where I had a really dedicated group of people. And now it was like, well, this is, instead of being like Oxygen 2.0 or whatever. So yeah, Brixy, and it gets very confusing because there's Bloxy, there's Brixy, there's Bricks. As I understand it, it's Brixy that people are moving to.
No, Bricks.
Is it Bricks, not Brixy?
Bricks.
Yeah.
Brixy is a site editing theme.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
Bricks is a page builder kind of theme. It's all in one, but it's a very interesting builder. It works really well.
Yeah. Yeah, and so on another call, Eagle and I spent a little bit of time kind of discussing how much do we talk about well, what's now called the site editor. So full site editing has been now branded the site editor. The process is still full site editing, and how much we should be talking about that for the general WordPress population versus people who are developing. And it certainly makes a lot of sense. And Eagle, you're definitely saying, hey, we should be talking about it because it really is a very powerful way that things are going. And I know that in our group, for example, we have a lot of folks where some of that's just beyond, people want a theme and then they're like, how can I best use it? And how can I make sure my analytics work and things like that? So what are your thoughts on where we are right now with the site editor 6.1? I'm looking forward to 6.2 because I know, but that's, there's some pretty cool things as I understand.
Yeah, some really nice things coming to 6.2.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be part of the conversation now because 6.1 leveled out the editor, the site editor, and the block editor quite a bit. 6.11, I've seen a few little subtle improvements, but the thing in our meetups is that all people who come in now who are new or who are creating a new website, they are by default getting 2023 site editing theme, the block theme installed. And so the conversation needs to start involving the fact that there is these two sides of the equation. There's the classic themes, and people do get this confused. There's the classic themes with the customizer settings, and there's the site editor with this block editor. And there's the confusion about, the block editor isn't just the block editor anymore. It's the site editor, it's the content block editor, the site block editor, and now the widget block editor. So there's 3 different block editors. So that has to be part of the conversation also. If we're going to, continue to help people that are new, we need to bring that conversation up to date because, like you say, in that meeting we have on Friday, those people are saying, hey, this is production ready. We're building production themes. We're hot to try. We're going for it, so, and these are big names. So there's a lot of big support behind it. And it's leveling out now. The theme.json, the block editing API, they call it, is becoming very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And there are some tools that are being created by the automatic team, the core team, that are assisting in this process. So yeah, it's definitely time to incorporate at least the discussion of it. If not saying, oh yeah, go for it. But if they're new, it's a site, they're doing it for their own selves. There's no reason why they shouldn't try it out.
Yeah.
And so we have to kind of help them out. And also that means we've got to get a little more up to speed so that we can answer questions because we're putting ourselves out there as a help desk.
Yeah. The whole point about what happens with a new user of WordPress who's using what comes as default being so different than what people who have been using WordPress. It's a challenge for any part of WordPress training. So just being aware and maybe always kind of reminding, hey, if you're using, this kind of theme, here's some things that, may come to you in the future because things are going to start happening, or here's an alternative when you're looking to change. So instead of, what I'm happy about is that I think we're going to find less and less this idea that folks are picking themes because they see a thumbnail that matches the business they're in and pick the theme based on some photos versus what the thing actually does. I think people are going to be really excited about getting to a point where all of a sudden the whole process becomes easier. Like if Ray, on our build site that we did, and for anyone who's new, we were building a site and we put a custom post type in. It was an animal rescue site. We'll come back to it. In fact, if we have time, maybe we'll use that for some demos on some of these other plugins for adding analytics to bring that full around. But this idea that when you go to, we're going to see when you say bring up hey, here's my new post type, pets, an example of our animal shelter. But then the first thing it shows is, here's the recommended block pattern that you should put at the top because that's standard to everything. And all of a sudden it's like that workflow is going to become nicer and cleaner and just more, not only friendly, but result in a quicker way to a more consistent, better product for people who are building these things. So,
well, with the Cambridge meetup the other day, were you there? I think you were.
I may have, I'm losing track.
I don't know. The guy brought up the question about Ocean WP and the image block. And I wasn't aware until he brought that up. But it points out the focus of the core team right now is the full site editing and the block editing. And what happened this 6.1, they released a bunch of new block configurations. One of those on the image block is borders and controls and stuff. And Ocean WP did not pick up. The block changes don't show up, or the block improvements don't show up. It also doesn't show up in Generate Press, which I'm very surprised. Astra, however, was on the ball. They've got those incorporated. So 6.1 changed some background configurations for certain blocks that caught a couple of the really big classic theme editors off guard. And that's kind of surprising. But it does point out the fact that the focus of what the core team is doing is the block editor, and they're changing configurations for the full site editing in the background, which classic themes are going to have to be on the ball to keep up with. Generate Press is usually right there. Ocean WP, I also think, is generally there. But I was surprised that this time Astra got there first. And Generate Press, I checked this morning, they still haven't picked it up yet. So
and we use we use Cadence on some of our demo sites, and I know a few people on this call use Cadence, and it's inconsistent. Like if you go under dimensions, the padding will work, but nothing else, for example. So it's a weird.
It doesn't affect me that much because I wouldn't use their image block anyway. I would use Generate Blocks as image block, and you'd probably use Cadence as image block, which means the third party. The third party blocks have already been there, but it's an inconsistency in what the user is going to see if they're switching back and forth between Astra and Generate Press, or Astra, Generate Press, or Ocean and a site editor. So because the blocks are not responding the same in the editor, because the configurations, the theme is not picking up the new configurations yet. So
we got a quick question. Hopefully, I think Wendy asks about a couple of websites loading slowly, and one of the recommendations she sees is to add expires headers. What is that? And I suppose the question is, how do I do that? How do I fix that? Who wants to jump in? Expires headers are basically just saying that, like, some of the files themselves, it's telling either the server or the computer or the browser to say, hey, these files are old, and reload them. I don't know from a site slowdown standpoint how that would affect speed necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think that would affect the speed. I mean,
it's one of the page performance suggestions, like on Pingdom speed tests.
The question I would ask you is, who are you? Who is your host?
Who is my host? It's iPage. It's been there a long time.
iPage. Don't know them. Performance is usually a server issue. How many people are on a server? What they're caching stuff that can helps. The tool that I'm using right now is one called Perf Matters. PERF MATTERS. It's not free, but it's on sale, and with the Black Friday, it's probably going to be a good price. But it makes configuring the performance aspects of your site very easy. And there's some really great YouTubes out there. I think WD Tufts did one, and I think maybe Tab, the admin bar people did that. Anyway, they're out there. The Perf Matters is getting some really high ratings, and so there's some of the big names in WordPress tutorials putting out tutorials on it. So
I guess I'll throw in too a little bit of, to me, that there's probably a higher priority things to look at first that will have a bigger impact than like by the time you get to expires headers, you're kind of like in the weeds a little bit. There might be something simpler, like looking at image sizes, these, servers, things like that. So
all of that is actually, pretty good. At least it's telling me it is.
And do you have actual?
You want to share?
Yeah. So we're happy to.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, sure. This one site has been loading slow all day.
You put a link in the, not that we're all going to hammer it and make it slower. If you put a link in the chat, we can poke around a little.
I will do that.
Yeah, I would try running page speed insights on it and seeing what the recommendations are. I mean, you don't have to be the fastest site. You just need to be average.
Right, and I'm usually content with average, but today it's below average. And I mean, this is I have another. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, don't mean you go ahead. I don't mean to talk over.
I have another site that I took over, which is even worse, and it's built with Elementor, and I'm like afraid to remove Elementor from it without totally having to rebuild the site.
Well, this is throwing a lot of errors too, I'm saying here. There's a JavaScript error.
Yeah, page headers is not your issue here.
No, I figured there was something more going on, but that is something I always come across. So
I mean, just the thing that jumps out at me real quickly is if you look at like in just the console, there's a bunch of JavaScript errors that, again, if it's failing on a JavaScript, maybe the rest of the page isn't loading. So there's a script that seems to be throwing errors called RC2 content script.
Yeah, and so when I see things like that, like in WordPress, I feel like I don't have I don't know where to find these scripts or what these scripts are either.
I'm wondering, is this from a plugin or something that looks like, you're using Divi? Nothing totally wrong with Divi, but it sometimes can be a little bit of a pain. So there's this, art.
Okay. Yeah, these are, I'm still one of those afraid to go to blocks.
Yeah.
Though I am going through slowly the lessons you guys have.
Are you looking at the Ax4.org site? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not loading for me.
Yeah, right. Why?
Neither.
What is happening?
Well, my guess is we're all trying to test it.
Right.
Well, no, but this
Crash the server.
No, I do think it's more than that, just because I've been barely able to work on it today.
Just came up partially.
Well, and a good piece of it, at $1.99 a month, iPage is definitely not going to be high-end hosting.
Right.
Yeah.
$1.99 a month. Pretty sure we pay more than that.
Would you mind sharing?
So,
are we recording still, Ray? I don't know if
Yeah, turn off recording.
I could stop it.